Psychosomatics and the body organs.
Perfetto, adesso parliamo di un argomento
Perfect.
che è veramente
Okay, now we're going to talk about a topic that is really fascinating. Namely, we're going to introduce the discussion on how emotions interfere with the various organs and viscera. Now, you need to know that each time you perceive, you feel an emotion, this emotion does not arise, develop, and die within the brain, but it also involves part of the body through the production of hormones. Okay, now I want to explain this further. Now, we have the sense organs, so we have sight, hearing, and taste, that perceive given stimuli from the outside environment. So, for example, sight or hearing of something that we've heard, such as, for example, disrespect in our concerns. So this, in turn, informs the brain, and the brain, with these information that it defers to the stomach for the production of bile, and this bile then is secreted into the blood and triggers off a sense of anger in you. Okay, so based on this external stimuli that communicate with the internal stimuli, we get a reaction. This topic is still today being studied by neuroscience. The brain areas that have yet to be discovered are numerous. So we only use, we know that we know of, we only use 5-6%. Some studies even say 10%. But given that we don't know what exactly is the 100% of the brain, we don't even know which part is being used. But now, I don't want to enter into this complex topic. It's not up to me to do it, but I just want to explain to you the simplest part of it. So, when emotions are blocked at the onset, when they are repressed at the onset, or on the contrary, when you're so tired to manifest these emotions, such as tired of being always worried, tired of always being angry, how this interferes with the organs and then hence with the body. Each emotion is pure energy. Pure energy that, if it arises and develops, needs to be discharged and hence manifested. But in fact, we get a physical unbalance in the various organs if this is felt but not manifested. Always with the example of anger, if I feel angry, 100% angry, so I feel very angry, but I repress that feeling because of my upbringing. For example, they told me that I should not express anger, or even due to the circumstances. Another example is that if I know that if I'm going to show my anger, my boss will fire me. So in the end, I am forced to repress it. So every time we repress an emotion, this is stratified or stratifies. Now, what happens? If this is not discharged, even at a later time, it will cause tension and in the long term, damage. So our task, now that we have learned these reflexology techniques, is to discharge these emotions. How do we do that? Well, by working on the foot. Now soon we're going to look at all these areas again, and then I'll explain to you which are the 5 main emotions or the primary emotion. Emotion of joy.
Oh, molto bene. Incominciamo col primo
Okay, very well. Let's start then with the first feeling, which is the feeling of joy. Now, you need to know that there are some people who cannot manifest this feeling. They feel it, they perceive it, but how can you manifest joy? Well, It can be a smile, it can be a word that you say, like, I love you, I care for you. This is manifesting. It can be a hug. But if a person perceives this emotion and then blocks it or represses it, in the long term, an imbalance will be created. Because remember that feeling any emotion whatsoever, feeling means having an amount of energy within oneself. If this is discharged, if this emotion is discharged, then the body will have a relaxation. There are some people, therefore, as I was saying, that cannot manifest emotions. Well, what do we do in this case? Well, we need to stimulate the various areas to put these emotions into circulation, such as the thyroid, the throat, and all the organs and viscera that contribute to perceiving this emotion. If these organs start to produce more or less than they should, and they're not synchronized one with the other, then the person will either not perceive the sensation of joy, like some people who never laugh, or in fact, by perceiving it, they will not be able to manifest it. So they will feel repressed. Now, when a person is repressing this emotion, how do we know it? Even if they repress it only in part. For example, some people may actually appear effusive in the face of others, but they only manifest 50% of those emotions, or at least what we see from the outside. So a good part of that emotion remains repressed. Now, we can find out how by looking at the fingers, at the toes, The opposite, that is. What does that mean exactly? All those people who do not actually perceive the emotion of joy. It's not that they repress it, they just don't feel it. For example, if they hear a joke, and 99% of the people listening laugh and one of them doesn't, that person is probably depressed, or they don't have energy. These people are easy to identify. They're not sun-spirited people. It may happen that it's normal for people to feel unhappy once in a while, but then eventually they will tend to feel better. But these people, instead, are constantly sad, so they never perceive the emotion of joy in any way whatsoever. So they really lack this energy. So what do you need to do in these cases? You need to stimulate code 1. By stimulating all the various times, you will notice that these people will start to change a little bit, to improve. Obviously, no one can make miracles, but if you stimulate them properly, you will notice that over time, those persons will improve, and they themselves will start to understand, and then, therefore, they will be grateful to you. The feeling of anxiety.
Bene, adesso parliamo del sentimento preoccupazione.
Okay, now let's talk about the feeling of anxiety. That is, for all those people who each time they face a period of difficulty, so their concerns are many, what do? Instead of manifesting their anxiety by asking questions, they actually repress these, maybe because they're afraid to ask. And this feeling remains within them, and as a result alters the functioning of the stomach, of the spleen, of the pancreas, and of the lymphatic nodes. They're functioning, specifically their filtering action. So this also turns into an attitude. It's people. So this repression can be identified by the callosity in the second toe. So when you find callosity in that zone, you know that that person is repressing doubts or concerns. So what do you need to do then? When you're faced with such a person, you will stimulate what is written in front of you now. The whole stomach, the spleen, the pancreas on both feet, the lymphatic nodes, and given that this is also an emotional aspect, also the fingertip of the second toe. So you work on them, and you will notice that they will improve enormously in the way they will manifest their feelings. So that where before they repressed feelings, now they will start to ask questions. Obviously, this is not going to happen overnight. It will happen over time. But you will notice that these people will show enormous improvement. The feeling of sadness. For all those people who have callosity in the third toe, so this can be on a phalange or on the other phalange, these people tendentially repress their feeling when they feel the need to cry. It's a repressed cry or repressed tears. It's quite frequent. You will find this especially in men. This is because of their, also in terms of their disposition in women, that they're more likely to cry. Well, in fact, it's easier for them to manifest tears because men have been brainwashed not to cry because a real man does not cry. So we will find this more frequently in men because men don't want to show their weakness. Now, the fact of repressing tears, creates problems in the lungs. This is because when the person feels the need to cry, the body activates a process by which it starts to produce more mucus, more phlegm. And then when somebody lets themselves go, they blow their nose more often. But if we feel this emotion and we repress it, this phlegm will it will not come out because the person doesn't let themselves go by crying, and it crystallizes in the lungs. It tends to dry up, and in the long term, it will cause problems. So what we need to do is to stimulate the lungs, the whole intestine, the ovaries in women or testicles in men, and the uterus or prostate, again, in whether it's a man or a woman. It's obvious that you can also find this in women. In fact, it's quite common. But when you start to stimulate these zones, you will increase that person's sensibility. So where the person before could repress their tears, now it will be more difficult for them to do so. Now, just to give you an example that has happened to me, once I went for treatment, for reflexology treatment, and the physician who was treating me noted that, I had this problem too. During the treatment, I noticed that even just a few days after the beginning of the treatment, where before I couldn't even blink at some things, I felt that suddenly I would get this lump in the throat when I saw like a sad movie on TV, and I felt a need to cry. So you can imagine the effort I had to make to repress my ears afterwards. Obviously, I should have manifested those tears to relax myself, and consequently all the muscles around the lungs, to relax those muscles. What you have most likely experienced in your life is that after a liberating cry, your body is strongly relaxed. We feel tired and almost empty. This is because the desire to cry creates within us an excess of energy, And by manifesting those tears, we are discharging that energy and relax. We get relaxation in turn. Feeling of anger.
Per tutte le persone che hanno il callo,
For all those people who have callosity in the fourth toe, whether the right or the left one,
gli organi che devi stimolare,
is the result of repression of anger, and the organs that we need to work on are the liver and the gallbladder.
devi sapere che quando
Bile, in particular, when it is secreted into the blood in an excess amount, allows you to perceive a sensation of anger,
non è la rabbia perché
very intense anger. So it's not anger because someone cut you off at the traffic light, but it's just the instinct of using, of swearing, and often of using one's fists. Certainly, anger doesn't know what education is, and this is why we get the instinct of using our fists, whether to lay it on someone, even a kick or a punch, or to break an object. I think that this must have happened to you at least once, to grab a dish and throw it to the ground, a plate, an object, a glass, whatever. Because this is an uncontrolled instinct. Well, people who can actually control this sensation and repress it leads to callosity on the fourth toe. So, if there is this callosity, then that means that that person has repressed, has felt that feeling, but has also repressed it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have this callosity. So, if there is the desire to tell someone off or to throw an object at them, and this as a result leads to a discharge, the body will have no traces. There will be no traces on the body. So if we are the victim of disrespect and we have manifested anger, there will be no trace on our body. But, however, if I felt the need firsthand and I was about to react, but my brain said, no, you can't, well, then we repress that feeling. We alter the nervous system in a specific section of the spinal cord. This message affects the feet, and we get callosity in the fourth toe. So we will need to stimulate the liver and gallbladder so that the person can express these emotions. An anger that is by no means a negative feeling. The emotion of fear.
Bene, adesso parliamo del sentimento della paura.
Okay, now let's talk about the feeling of fear.
Due categorie.
Now, you need to know that there are two categories of people. We have fearful people,
Non la sentono.
who are people who do not feel fear. They don't perceive it at all, like those crazy people who run through the city at high speed. Now, if these people felt fear, obviously they would have more judgment and more sense and would not do certain things.
Allora, che cosa succede? Queste persone proprio non sentono la
So,
sensazione di paura.
basically, these people don't feel fear, whether because their urinary system, which in terms of energy, it's very complex to talk about energy
Devi sapere tu perché
that controls the urinary system. But what you need to know, otherwise I would really need 2 days to explain all this. But what you need to know is that these people, by not feeling fear, act accordingly. So, for all these people, what you need to know is to stimulate the entire urinary system. So the kidneys, ureter, the bladder, and also the adrenal glands, which I have underlined in the screen in front of you. So you have to stimulate this urinary system to the point that when fear is necessary, these people will be able to feel it. And consequently, this fear will also protect them. And the other category of people is people who feel fear, but they repress it. So even when they feel fear, whether because they don't want to show their weakness, they repress these feelings. This is always in general terms. So when these people repress this emotion, a callosity forms on the fifth toe. Now, what we will need to know is to stimulate, what we will need to do is to stimulate the ureters and the bladder, and to soothe the zone of the adrenal glands. This because it soothes the adrenaline that these people have and this anxiety that they have, so that they calm down. So the fearful person will start to feel a bit of fear and they will start to calm down. The fearful person who represses his feelings because they were afraid to show their weakness will relax, will perceive it less, and will live more in harmony. Now, in conclusion, to end this topic, what you will need to do is a lot of practice, because each person is a case in itself, is a separate case. So you will need to do a lot of practice. Try to increase your sensibility in how you perceive that person, whether you see them as more relaxed from one session to the other. And you also need to ask that questions to that person. For example, many people say, Francesco, ever since I started treatment, I feel more emotional. So I perceive the need to cry a lot more. Or other people who said, for every silly thing, I feel more balanced. Other people, in the case of fear, asked me, if my daughter were late one night, just even for a minute, I would panic. Now, in fact, even if she's late more than what I was afraid of before, I don't worry and I'm not afraid. So you have these reactions in people. So ask them, try to assess the person, each person, and you will also be faced with skeptical people who will probably not listen to you in the beginning, who will not believe what you're saying. And you will notice that over time, that person will not dramatically change, but will improve slowly. Okay, so I have concluded with this lesson. I've concluded this very complex topic. I have tried to simplify it as much as possible because I didn't want to confuse you. So I've only given you a taste of what is the emotional aspects as they affect the body and the feet. Over time, however, we will go back to this topic, especially when we will be looking at the metameric massage. There, we will really understand everything much more clearly, and I will explain to you how the nervous system somatizes in a given area of the body, in the back particularly, and I will explain to you the nervous connection between the back as the nervous system and how this is transferred on the feet. Anyway, this will be the topic of the next video courses. Now just spend time to foot reflexology, do a lot of practice, and the more practice you will do, the more you will feel at ease, and you will be much better at doing all the treatments that I will teach you in the next video courses.